Hey everybody, Chapter 8, Lesson 1, and we're talking about a new time period now. We're covering the time period from 1920, give or take, at the end of Woodrow Wilson's term as president, and we're going to go all the way up to about 1929, 1930. And there's a nickname for this period of time that I want you to make sure you understand. Now, in your note guide, it calls it the Jazz Age, because that's the time when jazz became incredibly popular. But there's another nickname for this too, and it's the Roaring Twenties. And it's this idea that, a lion is powerful and huge and it roars. And it's this idea that the 1920s was that too. It was this kind of powerful time. So what we're going to be looking at here in this particular lesson and throughout all the lesson is how do we change as a people? Our identity, our culture, how does it change during the 1920s? That's the goal. And we're going to start today by taking a look at how the economy changes for people in the 1920s. And I want to start with Warren G. Harding. Remember, he's a Republican. He is elected in 1919, takes office in 1920. And this Republican promised us to kind of bring things back to the way they were before the Progressive Era. He wants to go back to the way things were during the Second Industrial Revolution. He wants to bring back laissez-faire. He wants to put an end to regulation. And you can see the kinds of things he wants to do here, right? Put an end to those reforms, bring back laissez-faire, put an end to the craziness of the Red Scare, a craziness to the turmoil and the race riots. He does a lot of different things. He appoints friends and allies to do this. Some of them are very, very important. We'll talk about them in a second. But he actually ends up dying early on into his term of a heart attack in 1923, so that we don't have enough kind of information, aside from the few scandals that were there, but that what we do know is that Harding himself was able to help get the economy booming again, going again. And we'll talk about why that was in a little more detail, because the guy who took over after Harding dies, his vice president, a guy named Calvin Coolidge, becomes president, and he says to America, look, Harding started this return of kind of industrial revolution laissez-faire. I'm going to continue it. I want you to reelect me in 1924, and I want you to allow us to keep this economy doing great, because it is doing great, according to Coolidge. Remember, it was really, really bad. I'm going to blow this up for you right here. It was really, really bad after Wilson was kind of overseeing it during the war, right? And you can see that right as the war ends in 1918, unemployment continues to go up, 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 up. It peaks in 1921 when Harding is in office, in his first year in office, and then it goes down, 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 down again, and it stays low. And that's the important thing. It stays low. So when we see Coolidge coming in right here at 1924, he says, look, elect me. Harding brought you back laissez-faire. I want to keep it going. Laissez-faire brought unemployment down. I want to keep it down. And America really kind of buys into this argument and says, you know what, this sounds like a really good idea. We should do this. So Calvin Coolidge, who becomes president in 1923 when Harding dies, gets reelected in 1924, and he'll serve until 1928. So Coolidge has to figure out how to do this, right? How do I keep the economy going, since it started under Harding with the return to laissez-faire, a return to normalcy? How do I keep it going? What can I do? So Coolidge looks around at all the things Harding had done, and he sees that Harding appointed a guy into office as Secretary of the U.S. Treasury. And that's this guy that's right here under my head, circle his face, Andrew Mellon. He is unbelievably brilliant when it comes to money. He's a genius. He can make millions doing anything. He was like 10 different companies he started. He's just an absolute genius. And Mellon's idea is that we need to put more money into the pockets of the average person. He gives it a fancy name. He calls it supply-side economics. And really all it says is this: when we put money into the pockets of people, maybe by cutting their taxes, they're going to spend that money on what we have in our supplies. When they spend their money on our supplies, then we can afford to make more stuff that they'll buy later on. So we see Andrew Mellon use this supply-side economics to keep the unemployment rate low throughout all of the 1920s, as that chart over here showed, right? The unemployment level stays low. And when Calvin Coolidge's time in office is going to come to an end in 1928, you're going to see another Republican candidate, a guy named Herbert Hoover, come along and say, you know what, we need to make sure we keep doing this. So we want to keep this supply-side economics going because it's helping Americans stay employed. It is helping Americans buy goods. It's a really important idea. So just a quick slide to help you understand what supply-side economics works. And remember, I told you that the basic idea is to get money into people's pockets so that they can spend more. And you can see that right here on this list. Step one is to cut taxes so that we have more money in our pockets. This means, step two, we have more to spend. Well, that means the economy, step three, is going to be stronger because more people are spending their money on goods that are produced. Because we have a stronger economy where people are buying a lot of goods, companies are going to have to hire more workers, people are going to have to make more money at work, which means over time, we'll be able to pay more and more in taxes because of a graduated income tax, but still have lower taxes than what we had before. And we're going to do much more with this down the road, but I just wanted to introduce the concept to you right here. So Andrew Mellon brings this idea out underneath Warren G. Harding in 1920. Harding dies in 23, and Calvin Coolidge keeps him around from 1923 to 1928. And then Herbert Hoover will keep Andrew Mellon around into the beginning of his term in 1929. So if that's how the economy is going, how is America responding to the rest of the world? Because we trade with the rest of the world, right? Our economy depends on exports and imports. Because the bottom line here is that, folks, by 1920, we're now not just the largest producing power in the world, we are the cheap top dog economic power in the world. And why would you want to risk that? Like, I got all this money in my pocket. Why would I want to risk losing that by getting involved with questionable countries that make bad decisions? Why would I want to get involved with Britain? That doesn't make sense. They just got stuck in a huge war because Germany entered Belgium. Woo! Why would I want to get involved in all these new countries that popped up after the Austro-Hungarian Empire fell, or this new Germany, or the Soviet Union, which is communist? We already freaked out by those guys. Why would I want to get involved with them? So Americans in the 1920s, they're really not at all excited about getting involved in the world affairs. They want to avoid wars by avoiding involvement in future affairs. They don't want anything to do with it. It's got a name, and that name is isolationism. It's this idea that we don't want to get involved in situations with Europe because they got us into World War I. Their submarines attacking the Lusitania. Their Zimmerman telegram to Mexico. They got us into the war. We don't need to be in a war wasting our money. It took us years to get things fixed after World War I ended. Why do I want to risk it now? In fact, what I want to do is come up with plans and ideas that are going to help me keep my money and get those suckers back, the loans back from those suckers that I gave money to begin with. A good example of this thing is called the Dawes Plan. I want to show you what this looks like, this Dawes Plan. It looks like this. We want to get money back from the Allies. So what do? Well, the first thing that we're going to do is loan $2.5 billion to Germany. Well, why would we do that? Because we want Germany to keep some of that money for their economy. We're going to let them keep $500 million. in their own pocket. But what about that rest of that $2.5 billion? Oh, that's easy. The rest of that $2.5 billion goes to the rest of the Allies to pay off those debts, those war reparations. Now, the Allies take that money and they just send it right back to us. That $2 billion circles right back around, and the Allies kick in an extra $600 million. This is a really good deal because we loaned out $2.5 billion and we get back $2.6 billion interest. So the economy of the world only has to produce a little bit, $100 million, in order to keep this thing going. Our banks get interest. Americans don't risk their money. We don't have wars from all over the place. It's a good deal. Some other ways in which we're going to try and keep our money safe is to keep people from going to war. There's two things on this screen that show you that. One of them is the Washington Conference in 1921, the Washington Conference. And that conference discusses disarmament, removing our weapons. So we're talking about not having these weapons anymore. And we also outlaw war with something called the Kellogg-Briand Pact. This is a crazy idea, by the way, because we outlaw war, but we don't make people give up their weapons. That means that they're able to say, we won't go to war, but they get to keep their guns. What do you think is going to happen if I say, you can't go to war, but you can keep your gun? Yeah, sooner or later, somebody's going to go to war. Anyway, these are all different things we'll talk about more in class, and that should be good to go.